So hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the Shakti Flow Summit, where we learn how to embrace our feminine flow to receive more joy, balance and energy in life. In this circle, no time exists, so everyone who watches or listens to this now or later are all included in the energy of this circle right now. Today we have a wonderful teaching expert, Emily Cassel. Sweet Emily is a certified life, business and leadership coach for soulful women on a mission. Through one-on-one coaching, the Feminine Leadership Mastermind, and her 12-week Freedom is Sexy program, Emily supports women in reconnecting with their full range of divine feminine wisdom and power, creating abundant lives and visionary businesses, and designing a soulful feminine approach to success that is sustainable and avoids burnout, stuckness, and stress. She is also the host of the podcast Sexy Soulful Success and holds soulful seasonal soirees for women in Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and share some things today as part of the summit. So thank you.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. A lot of S's in your bio.
I know, everybody keeps telling me that when they read it. I'm like, yeah. And I think, there's something about the letter S and the sound that it makes that's so feminine to me. And so I love it that there's so much of that like sensual S sound, if that makes sense to anyone other than me.
Yeah, that is really true, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a very feminine letter.
Yeah, and it sounds so good. Soulful seasonal soirees.
Yeah, and Shakti Summit, right? Like I noticed that the summits and the things that I'm part of also have that like S sound. Like I was in one called Stay Sacred. And I was like, she made the same comment. And I was like, well, you did it too. Right? Like there must be something to it that we're all gravitating toward around the divine feminine and our work around the divine feminine and Shakti, the letter S and the sound that it makes and the way it resonates in our body, I think is special.
Yeah. So what is feminine energies or feminine power to you? How do you define it?
Oh, so many ways. So the first way that I like to think about it is that the feminine is all of the parts of life that make life worthwhile, and the masculine is the parts of life that make things possible. So the feminine for me operates on more of a feeling, somatic, body level and a spiritual connection. And then the masculine is more of the how do we get things done, the structures, the processes, the logical mind. And I really believe that when we live our lives with the feminine as our leader, right? Like when we let the feminine take the lead, when we allow the Shakti energy to flourish and thrive and be the thing that pulls us and guides us to what it is that we're being called to do or how we're being called to serve, the masculine can then come in and support the creation of those callings and those pulls and those intuitive hits and everything that goes along with that. And so for me, the feminine is like the compass, and then the masculine is like the line on the map of how to get to where we're going. And I also think of the feminine as more of the visionary aspect. So a lot of times when I meet with women to talk about their businesses that are a soulful creation, and a lot of times women come to me feeling like their soul is dying is the term that they use, which is kind of funny, but it's also not at all funny because I've heard it so many times that I'm like, yeah, I feel you and I've been there, but also that's sort of the sensation that they have is like, my soul is dying. I can't keep living in this way. And I'm ready to do something else. I'm ready to take a risk. I'm ready to step out of my comfort zone, and I'm ready to carve out a new path. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And so for me, the feminine is the vision. the actual like broadening of the perspective, the expansive nature of viewing the whole picture instead of just what we often do, which is looking at in the moment what needs to happen and the to-do list and the parts of life that make things like happen. So the more masculine qualities that we're just taught and brought up to value so much more than those of the feminine. And so for me, the masculine is also like the container that holds the space for the feminine to thrive. So the feminine has more of a fluid, changing mosaic quality, where the masculine is sort of the sturdy structure, the more grounded energy. And I think the key to this is we all need both, and there isn't one that's more powerful than another. They're both so needed. But what's happened in our world is that the balance has tipped so much that we are almost like the feminine has become extinct. And there's a rising now of women like you and like myself and like I'm sure all the other women in the summit and beyond who are devoted to bringing the feminine back and the divine feminine and feminine energy and revaluing those parts of ourselves and those pieces of our lives that make life worthwhile. Because what we see on a global scale is that, you know, industrialization and things, even in our environment, like there are so many things happening right now that have become so overvalued in the masculine qualities and masculine energy, meaning like so focused on the results and the outcome and the structures and the bottom line and the how. Even when we look at books about business, and this is something I talk about often with the women I work with, is when we look at the wealth of knowledge there is about business right now, most of it is written from a very masculine perspective, a very linear, follow this step-by-step process and you will create XYZ result. And if you're not doing it this way, and if you're not, like, here are all the things you should know, and if you don't know them, then it's not going to work, right? That there's only one way to do something. And so for me, what I've always felt intuitively is that there are an infinite number of ways to do something. And that when we each, as women or as men, when we each take into our own account, into our own hands and take responsibility for feeling the way we want to feel and designing the life that we want to live and approaching things the way that feels really good and aligned, then we start to create results that are far beyond what we could ever imagine, because we are in that space of alignment where the feminine energy is flowing, versus when we are just focused on the masculine, we end up totally cutting off our creative power and our intuition and our feminine genius around being an inherently creative being and being someone who, and having all of these feminine qualities, obviously, because we are women, and so we're inherently more connected than anyone else would be to these qualities, because they are part of our nature and part of our makeup. And when we avoid that, we actually cut off our own power source. And so that's sort of, to me, what the feminine represents and what the feminine is. And it's not necessarily about being girly or feminine in the ways that we think about as a society, right? Like, for example, like right now, I'm a perfect example of what would be considered feminine in our societies, right? Like wearing pink and whatever. But that's not necessarily the extent of the feminine. And what I find really fascinating is when I started to dive into what is this whole divine feminine thing and just felt called to this work, and started doing a lot of research and my own self-discovery, what I found was the feminine is actually the full expression of who we can be as women. So it's not just limited to this one box that we often think of when we think of femininity, and we all have our own constructs around what that word and what that term means. But what I've learned and what I teach now is all of these different expressions, all of these different archetypes, all of these different ways of being in our feminine energy and connecting with that part of ourselves, because it isn't just one thing. The feminine is everything and nothing at the same time. She is like, the divine feminine energy is something that is a mystery in part, right? And so and it's like a both and situation. It's not an either or, whereas the masculine is sort of an either or. The feminine is a space for both and everything and nothing at the same time, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I could talk forever about all the different things that the feminine energy is and isn't. And so that's my response to that question. And it's ultimately like the space that we can live in and the energy that we can step into to be in a space of surrender and receptivity and find the power in the softness instead of just in the hardness, you know, and find the strength in who we naturally are, you know, and the ways that we naturally are being.
Yeah, and I was thinking, as a business coach, you have to have that masculine energy in your work as well.
Right.
How do you bring that through?
So a lot of times what I see when women come to me is because they are running soulful businesses, right? Or wanting to run a soulful business. Oftentimes they are either super stuck in like too much masculine or super stuck in too much feminine and nothing's getting done, right? So like if there's too much feminine and there's no structure, no results are ever created, there's no follow through, right? And if you're too in the masculine, then you're just constantly creating and doing stuff, but it's not necessarily in alignment. And these are the two things that I often see when women come to work with me at first. Or if they're super in their masculine, they're also really stuck in their head and sort of talking themselves out of doing what it is that they're feeling called to do. So they're getting the like feminine hits and then they're shutting it down, right? They like know what would feel good. And then their logical mind jumps in and their ego mind and their fear and self-doubt and self-criticism and all of these things, past evidence from experiences that they've had in their life before where things didn't quite work out or they didn't have the results that they were seeking, and sort of squash the desire. And so I see these two expressions of both like too far in the masculine and too far in the feminine. So my intention is really to bring those two together and bridge the gap between listening in deeply and tuning in to hear the inner wisdom in the feminine, but also creating a soulful strategy to support that. So I don't create, I don't prescribe. A lot of coaches have like a really structured method that they walk people through, and like everything that they do is very much like pre-designed. And so for me, what I really like to do is listen to my clients and help them like reflect back to them their own inner wisdom and hold the space for that to come through and find different ways to welcome that through. And then what we do based on that is build an intuitive and soulful strategy for them to bring their desired results and vision into fruition and into reality using really soulful, beautiful, feminine practices, and also approaching things from a mindset that honors both the feminine and the masculine and sees both as equally important, versus what a lot of what I see is even in the coaching industry is that there's a lot of overemphasis on the masculine when it comes to business coaching specifically, which doesn't quite line up with a lot of the women like myself, which is why I felt called to do this work in the first place, because we need both. And if we don't have both, and if we don't feel like we have permission to be fully who we are and our full expression, then we're not really serving the world in the ways that we need to, that we could, as much of an impact as we could be making. Because I believe that for us as women in this day and age, when we are so devoid of the feminine, our job in anything that we do is also to be that presence and to bring those things through and to lead from that place so that we can empower other women to have permission to do the same and to truly have it all as a result. So that is sort of how I see avoiding burnout and overwhelm and stuckness and stress in your business happens, is when you really listen deeply to the feminine and then take soulful aligned action to bring those desires and that vision to life, and to do it in the support of other women who are walking the same path in a sacred sisterhood community, and with a coach who really understands and values and holds you to that more feminine expression and to your own potential and your leadership as someone who is walking that path and who is, pursuing her sacred mission in the world.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. I
Thank
can't help, you were talking now about how to avoid burnout and stress. But I'm really interested in hearing more about your Freedom is Sexy program. Contain anything on how we can avoid stress and burnout?
Definitely. So everything that I teach through that program, it's a 12-week program, and it combines both private coaching, one-on-one, and sisterhood. So these are the two most powerful tools that I've found in building my own business and designing the life that I really want to live, is having both the one-on-one laser focused support of someone who can reflect back to you your brilliance and really get you through the fears and self-doubt and anything that's in your way, and also having the community support of women who in sisterhood who are doing the same work and who are devoted to the same path. Because a lot of times what happens is we'll share an idea with a friend or a spouse or someone who means well, but who has their own blocks, who's not necessarily doing that work on their own, who doesn't necessarily see the bigger picture vision of what's possible, and can't hold the space for you to know that it's possible for you and encourage you to do it in a way that is sovereign and honors your desires and doesn't involve their own stuff and their own triggers in the equation. So that's what normally happens. And I've seen this with women time and time again. And it's the biggest thing that we just don't recognize is happening, because we take someone who we love and who we know loves us, and we take their opinion and we make it mean that it's true, right? Like if your spouse or if your the person who you love and trust most says it's not going to work, or who do you think you are to do that, or their own beliefs get in the way, then you're going to be held back, of course, because you're going to value that person's opinion. And it's really not healthy. Even parents, I've seen this a lot too with women, is like your parents who you love and value and respect, right? Or your father or your mother or whoever. Oftentimes we get in the way of our own success when we share our ideas with people who aren't necessarily walking the same path, right? It's like asking someone for directions to a place that they've never been before that you're going. It's the same concept. And so in this program, I lead women through a process of 6 different modules that are really, for me, what I've found to be the feminine pillars of building a soulful business, and really getting in touch with the vision and also backing it up with the strategy and the structure and the accountability and the support and the more masculine quality. So it's really bridging that gap, like I was saying, around honoring and remembering and coming home to the feminine energy within you and using that as the compass to create the plan and the map and the route to get there, which is the soulful strategy. And then in the program, we also have workbooks and guest mentor videos and interviews with women who have been there, who are walking that path and telling you the real story of the behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see on their social media 7 years in, when they were first starting out. And there's different bonus resources and really amazing. We talk about cycle tracking and how tracking your menstrual cycle is such a game changer in terms of your productivity, and really giving yourself full permission to be all of who you are and have that not be an inconvenience, but have that be something that is something you can leverage to create more success and fulfillment in your life and more freedom ultimately. And I really believe that what we are all truly seeking is freedom from our own minds, in a way, like our own ego mind, and also freedom from anyone else's rules or expectations, or even our own from ourselves. Especially as women, we are so, we have this thing about perfectionism and almost wearing it as a badge of honor. And we have this thing about overdoing it and overgiving and having that be a badge of honor. And then we have this busyness badge of honor. And there's so many different like badges of honor that we wear proudly, and yet we don't see how they're keeping us stuck and preventing us from feeling truly free in our lives. And these are things that we've been told and raised and praised for throughout our whole lives. And so of course I hear a lot of women who, when we get on our first call together, they're like, so I'm a perfectionist. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. And they're always so proud to tell me that. That's like how they define themselves, how they have created their self-concept around being a perfectionist or doing too much or being an overachiever or whatever. And I was the same exact way throughout my whole childhood, throughout my whole schooling and university, and even in my first jobs. Like before I started coaching, I was that way. And even I would argue probably when I did start coaching, and there's still, I like to say sometimes I'm a recovering perfectionist because there are still tendencies that pop up. They're so few and far between now. And I know I have tools to get back to where I want to be when those things do pop up. But still, we put so much pressure on ourselves. Yeah. And I think the feminine and working with the divine feminine and working with Shakti and really rediscovering this part of ourselves and having there be a balance there is something that truly is liberating for all of us and keeps us, if we don't do that, the default mode is that we stay in competition with one another. We stay in a scarcity mentality. We stay in a space where we don't feel free, where we feel stuck and overwhelmed and stressed because we're not clear about the bigger picture. We're not connected to our mission and why we're here and our purpose and our vision for the future and what we're creating and the impact we want to have in the world. Because when we are, we're able to be led and guided so much more beautifully and easily and in flow. So it's not so much like we don't get stuck when we know that we're here for a reason and that all we have to do, all we need is within us, and we have the support and the resources and the tools externally to be able to lean into whenever we feel that way, right? Like stuck is such a temporary thing, and stuck, I think, is really what we call feeling helpless, right? Like when we feel just like we aren't well resourced. And I had a funny experience that was not funny in the moment, let me tell you, where I felt totally helpless. And I was on a roller coaster actually with my boyfriend for his birthday, and we got stuck on the roller coaster. And I was like, this is my worst fear. And it reminded me after the fact, as I was reflecting on it, and thank goodness we're okay. But it reminded me of like, wow, I just felt so helpless in that situation. I couldn't get out. I couldn't walk down. I couldn't go backwards. I had to go forward into the zone of the unknown and the really scary part. And it was scarier to not know what was going to happen than it was to, not like, it felt like I was frozen in time, and I feel like a lot of my clients say that to me about their life. And the only part of life that feels scary is when we feel stuck, right? Because we then things aren't flowing. Then it's like, the difference between going on a roller coaster and getting stuck on it versus just keeping going. It's like, woo-wee, it's fun, versus, is there something wrong? Am I going the wrong way? Am I not doing this? Am I going to die? Are the fears coming up, right? Like literally the life and death way that the ego mind registers fear is still the same as it has been for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, your program, a lot of women doesn't have their own businesses. They really feel stuck in where they are in someone else's business. Can they use your program too to get some points on how to do a normal job when you're in the corporate business?
Yeah, I usually have a blend of women. Mostly the program works really well for women who are thinking about starting their own business or who are already running their own business and want to up level. I had a client who is in Turkey actually who did the program last fall, and she she quadrupled her income, she told me, after the program in her business,
Wow.
which she'd been in for 7 years, which was insane to me. I was like, really? And like, you know how when you create something and you're like, I know that this works, and then someone tells you how well it actually worked for them, and you're like, what? It's amazing. It's so cool. But you know, she showed up and did the work, so that was a lot of it too. But so women who are thinking about, also I've had women in the program who have been incredibly successful in the program, who have received amazing results and who have created amazing results, who were thinking about a career transition, or maybe not thinking about necessarily starting their own business, but about how do I find more joy or fulfillment or freedom in the confines of my own job that I'm working right now. Or how do I find more meaning or purpose in that? And how do I find more freedom in my life as a whole? Because for me, a lot of the work that I do, it might be focused around business, but ultimately it's really about leadership for me. And so leadership to me means the cohesion of life and business and work and your sacred mission, and the way that you're living your life and showing up every day, and the way that you're being and what you're embodying, and the change that you're making, the ripple effect that you're creating just by showing up in a room and sharing who you are. So it's not so much specific to business, although it will insanely help your business if you do have one, but it's not necessary that you own a business or even thinking about owning a business. Because of the way that the program is structured, I did that intentionally so that there's laser focused one-on-one support for each woman in the program, where we can talk about and focus on and coach you through anything that's coming up that's keeping you stuck or small. So it doesn't have to be specific to business, but it can be.
And you also have a free gift for us today.
Yes.
10 minutes guided morning ritual. I will send out the link to. Can you tell us a little about that amazing gift for us?
Yes, I would love to. So this gift came from my desire to have a really easy way to start my day powerfully and feel aligned without having to do much, like without having to exert much mental energy. So this year, my theme for the year is all about ease. So I wanted to create a way for myself and my clients that could be a really easy way where literally all they had to do was press play to have an amazing day. And so, and to do all the different things that we talk about in our sessions, and have one way that you could just refocus and recharge and tune in to have an amazing day. Because I know when I have a morning ritual that I do actively, I feel so much better. My day flows so much more. I feel free. I feel fulfilled. I feel on purpose. I feel connected. There are so many things. I feel abundant. There's beauty everywhere. It's just awesome. So this is the gift that I created, and it's a 10-minute morning ritual. It's an audio recording. So all you have to do is just literally press play and make sure your sound is on your phone, or you can listen to it on a walk or wherever you are. And basically it walks you through just a morning ritual to move your body and get out of your head and into your body. There's a bit of journaling that happens and just a couple things to get clear on. You're going to feel so good. There's music in the background, which is fun. So there's some play associated, and yeah, it's really fun and I love using it. So
yeah, that sounds really amazing. I look forward to listening to it. But our time is running out now, so thank you very much, Emily. It's been a pleasure learning from you, and I think I speak for all the women present here in our timeless circle when I say that we have learned a lot today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, to you and everyone else in this circle, just keep the Shakti flowing.
Yes.